Today we're talking about color, why some colors stay beautiful for years, why others fade, stain or look tired after just a few washes. Hi everyone, I'm Veronica, and in this channel we talk about clothes, how they're made, how they wear and how to choose them better in real life. And before we talk about what colors last and which ones don't, we need to quickly understand how clothes actually get their color, because this is where everything starts. So first let's discuss about the dyeing versus the printing processes. And this will be the science and chemistry section, so if this is not something you like, feel free to skip it to the next section where we'll talk about how they act in daily life. Just check the time code below. So getting back to the chemistry aspect, there are two types clothes obtain their color, either through dyeing or through printing processes. They may seem similar, but they behave differently over time, and the processes in essence are also differently entirely. So let's go through them and see what they actually are. Dyeing is a process where the colors are chemically bonded to the fibers themselves. This can happen either before the fabric was made, after the fabric was woven, or once the garment is already sewn. It all depends on a lot of factors, the colors, the dyes, the fabric, everything. But these are the ways a color can appear on a piece of clothing. And printing, on the other hand, means that the color, pigment, or even a whole image is applied on top of the fabric to create patterns, images, or strong surface colors. Today we will discuss more about the dyes and the process of dyeing. The printing and everything related to it will be in another video, so subscribe not to miss it. And about the dyes. So there are two main types, natural and synthetics, basically as almost everything in this life. Natural dyes, as you could guess, come from plants, animals, or minerals. Meanwhile, the synthetic ones are chemically produced, usually from petroleum. And if we are going to compare the natural dyes versus the synthetic dyes, we would of course notice that the natural dyes are eco-friendly because everything that comes from nature is friendly with nature and there are no chemicals involved. But meanwhile, the synthetic dyes are less eco-friendly because they use chemicals at every single step, from the step of creating the dye to the step of actually dyeing the fabric, so this is not very good in relation with the environment. At the same time, we have the natural dyes, but they are actually less colorfast, which means that they are lasting less on our clothes, but the synthetic dyes are very intense colors, they last for a long time, they offer consistent colors, and they are actually highly colorfast because they are chemically produced and they can stick to the fabric very well. And if we talk about the color range, natural dyes offer a very limited line of colors because not every single color can actually be found in nature. But the synthetic ones offer very wide colors options because most of the colors with very intense hues, they are actually not natural produced. Let's think about the neon colors or the orange colors or something that is very, very intense. A natural dye will never be able to do that. But this is why chemical colors actually succeed. And if we're talking about what to expect in the process of dyeing, of course, the natural ones, because they're less color fast, less availability and so on, they offer variable results because of the way they are compared to the synthetic dyes that offer very predictable results. And also natural ones, as you could also guess, they are very gentle on the fabric, but the synthetic ones are a little more aggressive, can be harsh to them, can actually damage a little the fibers and so on. So when we compare the dyes, natural are of course good, and natural is always better for the planet, for us, for the skin and everything, but sometimes it's just not a valid option if we need something specific, if we need to dye some specific fiber, if we need a particular color and so on. So it's really a matter of what is needed, when, for which environment, for which purpose and so on. So there are no good or no bads in theory, but this is how things are. Now that we know what type of dyes exist, let's discuss about the methods of dyeing a fabric. So when you think of dyeing, imagine that it's a process for which a color is being soaked by the fabric. It doesn't just sit on top of it. This is why when you look at a fabric, it looks completely uniform in its respective color. And because of this, dye fabrics usually fade more evenly, the color becomes part of the material, not just a surface layer. And how well it lasts actually depends on the chemistry and the fiber type. And we'll talk about this a little later. There are many types of textile dyeing methods, so let's go one by one and see what they're all about. Because it really matters what method is used, because this influences the type of dye, the type of fabric that could be actually applied for this type of method, and actually how it's going to last later. So let's go. Vat dyeing. Vat dyeing is a traditional and widely used method where fabrics are immersed in large containers or vats filled with dye solution. This technique is particularly effective with dyes like indigo because it's known for producing deep, long-lasting colors. It is also ideal for creating rich hues on natural fibers, though it requires actually more steps than simpler dyeing methods. And when it comes to the vat dyeing process, for this method, the dye is firstly brought to a soluble form, which means it's being mixed with various liquids or solvents actually. So in order to create this soluble form of dye, then the fabric is being immersed in this large container with dye, and after this step, the fabric is immersed in another large container with oxidizing agents to develop the final color. So it's not only the dye itself. There are actually oxidizing agents that are having the role to secure the color in the fabric. And that dyeing is a good method for producing vibrant, color-fast results like the indigo color, and especially good on cellulose fibers like cotton. And this is why it's mostly used on natural fibers. Another dyeing process is reactive dyeing. This is a technique where the dye forms a strong chemical bond with the fibers, resulting in colors that are highly resistant to washing and fading. And it is very effective on cotton and other natural fibers because it's producing a bright, long-lasting colors when connected to this type of fibers. And this type of dyeing is widely used in both industrial settings and also at home dyeing due to its excellent color fastness. So if you saw online videos of people dyeing things at home, most probably it's a reactive type of dyeing process. When it comes to the method, the dye is applied in an alkaline environment. Alkaline means that in pH scale it's actually above 7, and also in terms of dyeing at home, this usually means that in this process there is either needed to be used washing soda, baking soda, or certain detergents, or even bleach in order to obtain that alkaline environment for the dye to stick. So as I mentioned, the alkaline environment is needed in order to facilitate the chemical reaction between the dye and the fiber, making it stick better. And reactive dyeing is actually very good for ensuring the color remains vibrant even after repeated washing, and it's also a popular choice for clothing and home textiles because it's very simple to actually dye something through the reactive dyeing process. And now let's talk about direct dyeing. So in the case of direct dyeing, the dye is being applied directly to the fabric without requiring extra fixatives or solvents or alkaline environments, nothing. It's just the dye itself. This type of dyeing is well suited for fabrics like cotton and is easy to use, but the color may actually fade over time without additional treatments that will help to secure the color onto the fabric. This type of dyeing is also popular for home use and small-scale production, but the main drawback is that the colors are not as color fast as those achieved through other methods, and because of this, potentially it leads to fading or bleeding during washing. Another dyeing method is resist dyeing. This technique is actually a very creative one compared to the other ones that seem very straightforward, and during this process, parts of the fabric are treated to prevent dye absorption, creating a pattern or a design. Popular styles of resist dyeing include batik, where wax is used to block dye, and tie-dye, where a fabric is tied or folded to create resist areas. Basically, this is a way to prevent the color to stick to some parts of the fabric. This method is excellent for producing unique artistic designs and is widely used in both traditional and modern fashion. This allows for intricate patterns and design, making each piece unique. And this technique can be applied using various materials as resists, including wax, paste, even stitching, offering endless possibility for creative expression. But getting back to some more chemically focused types of dyeing comes also acid dyeing. Acid dyeing is a method in which an acidic environment is used to help the dye bond with the fabric, resulting in vibrant and long-lasting colors. This works well with protein-based fiber such as wool and silk, and is commonly used for delicate fabrics in fashion and textile design due to its ability to produce rich shades. And when it comes to the process, the dyes are dissolved in hot water with an acid, often vinegar or citric acid, and applying the solution to the fabric. And the heat and acidity help the dye molecules bond with the protein fibers, creating a strong color-fast result. There is also one more type of dyeing method that is actually a little different than the ones that I talked before, because this is actually not something that is applied to dye a whole garment, a fabric, or a yarn, which is already finished, but is actually something that is used in order to dye the fiber solution. And this is called solution dyeing. In this case, the dye is added to the fiber solution before it is actually spun into yarn, embedding the color in the fiber itself. So it's actually the very basis of a piece of clothing that we have. And this method makes the color highly resistant to fading even under sun exposure or repeated washing. This is why it's often used for fabrics exposed to outdoor elements such as upholstery and performance fabrics. And by incorporating the dye at such an early stage of fiber production, solution dyeing creates a product that is colored throughout rather than just on the surface, and it ensures that it's being fully soaked by the fiber itself. And this results in exceptional color fastness and durability, making it ideal for applications where a color retention is crucial. So imagine your sportwear. It never fades, right? Even if it's in the sun, even if you run, even if you sweat, it just stays the same. This is the secret, the solution dyeing process. So now that we clarified the types of dye and know the ways the fabric could be dyed, let's discuss about why some colors fade faster than others and what to do to actually prevent these issues. A big myth around color fading or any bad quality clothes is that it's only a matter of price and that cheaper clothes fade faster than expensive ones. It can be true sometimes, but very often it's actually not. When it comes to color, color durability actually depends on three things: the type of dye, the dyeing process, and the base base fiber itself. So when it comes to the dyes shouldn't just sit on fabric. They should bond to fibers. And not all bonds are equally strong. Some dyes form stronger chemical bonds with the fiber, and these tend to last longer and fade more evenly. And this is usually the result of reactive dyeing, vat dyeing, acid dyeing, and also when the dyes are being applied for solution dyeing. These are the methods that create the most color-fast results. And also if the base fiber is a synthetic material, this is actually also a factor that makes it even stronger, because it creates chemically stronger bonds between the dye and the fiber. But also when it comes to the dye, we should always remember that the dye is constantly attacked by washing, sunlight, sweat, friction, and also heat. And also different dyed fabrics that have been used for different methods react very differently to these stresses. Natural fibers react worse, synthetic better, some more color-fast fabrics react better, some less, and so on. So let's discuss more about the dyeing process, because not all dyeing methods create the same kind of bond between the color and the fiber. Some dyeing processes rely on weaker physical attachment instead of strong chemical bonding, and in these cases color durability depends heavily on external factors like washing, heat, and friction. So when it comes to the direct dyeing that uses dyes that attach loosely to the fiber, the excess pigment often sits on the surface, leading to bleeding, faster fading, or color transfer during washing. And depending on the color that is wanted to be obtained for this specific fabric, there can be mixed or composite pigments being used, which means that the end color is being built from multiple pigments that don't react equally to light, water, or detergents. And as one pigment breaks down faster, the color shifts instead of fading evenly. So this also matters. We already talked a little about the base fibers, so now let's go a little deeper. The fiber itself sets the limit of how stable a color can be. Dye longevity isn't just about quality, it's about how well the fiber, dye type, and process work together. Natural and regenerated fibers, cotton, wool, linen, and viscose absorb dye deeply, but fixation is often uneven. When one part of a dye releases faster than another, it shows up as patchiness, an even tone, or a dusty look rather than clean, even fading. And when it comes to the synthetic fibers, although they usually create stronger chemical bonds between the fiber and the dye, actually some fibers don't absorb dye easily and require specific dye types and high heat for them to actually being absorbed by the fiber. So this is a downside. But the advantage is that the color will be very color fast. But when the dye fiber match isn't ideal, color tends to sit closer to the surface and fades or rubs off faster. And although I talked that there are many factors that come to the end result and how long lasting is the color, we actually have to remember that there is actually another thing, the color itself. Because there are colors that fade, stain, or change faster, regardless of all the other factors. So let's go through them. Blacks, navy, charcoal, mid blue denim, basically everything that is close to black. In this case, the colors are made by layering multiple dyes, blue, red, and yellow, to appear black. There is no black pigment, it's actually combined from this type of pigments. And washing removes those layers unevenly. So when one dye leaves faster, the black actually turns to gray, brown, or greenish. And with washing, the heat and detergent speeds this up. So this is why your black t-shirt is not black anymore. But not all black t-shirts that aren't black anymore look the same when it comes to the color. This is a fun fact. I'm pretty sure this doesn't help your black t-shirts, but at least now you know why they are actually not looking grayish the same way. And our color category is the reds and purples. They rely on larger, less stable dye molecules, and they don't bond strongly. One of the factors that really influences the long lasting of the purple and red colors is the UV light, because UV light breaks them down faster. And combined with the washing and sunlight, which is the UV light, it leads to a faster color loss. And our color is yellow. Yellow is less stable, more sensitive to UV light, mostly because of its not intense hue, and also it's more prone to oxidation. And also this is why it's less wash resistant. And mostly this is the reason why your yellow clothes may not be that intense yellow anymore and slowly turning into a cream, whitish color. And since we're talking about very bright colors, here come the camel and beige tones. They're actually created by mixing yellows, which we already know but is not very resistant, browns, and a touch of red or black. And each of these dyes ages differently, reacts differently to washing, heat, and light. So instead of fading evenly, one component fades faster and the color shifts either to the yellowish, pinkish, gray, or muddy tones. And if during the dyeing process there were some finishing treatments that have been applied to the fabric, they can actually affect the lack of color fastness. Such treatments can be optical brighteners, softeners, or surface finishes, and these wash out quickly, revealing the true underlying tone, which actually feels like fading even when the fiber itself is intact. And first, moving a little from the camel beiges and yellows, here come the muted greens. They are created by mixing blue and yellow, which we already know but is not really good at resisting, and sometimes also a touch of black or brown to mute them. So each component fades at a different speed, as you could guess. Yellow fades first, no surprise. It breaks down fastest because of the UV exposure and the washing. And as yellow disappears, fibers, the color drifts towards cooler tones. And this is why the olive color will slowly turn to gray-green colors, sage color will turn towards bluish-gray tones, and army green will turn towards flat and lifeless type of green, which looks very washed out. And a different category of colors that is worth talking about are the neon shades. Neon shades get their brightness from fluorescent pigments, and these pigments absorb UV light and re-emit it, creating the glow effect. Fluorescent pigments sit closer to the surface of the fiber, not deep inside, which means that they are actually easier to be washed out. And although they need the UV light to actually show this neon color, UV light actually breaks fluorescent molecules. Once broken, the glow is gone permanently, and what remains is a dull pastel version of the color. And heat, detergent, and friction accelerate pigment loss as well. And hot water and towel drying makes fading faster. And when it comes to the natural fibers, fluorescent pigments don't bond strongly with them. But meanwhile, the polyester holds neon slightly better, but still fades faster than non-neon colors. So if we are comparing it to non-fluorescent colors, these neon colors and shades are very unstable. And since we talked about the dyes, the fabrics, and how everything works combined with the dyeing methods and everything, let's talk about some risky fabric and color combinations that actually create non-color fasting results. Because this is where a lot of disappointment happens, because the same color behaves differently completely depending on the fabric. So for example, the black cotton often turns gray because cotton is not able to absorb other shades, which are parts of the black color, very well. So they start leaving the fabric very fast and the black turns gray. Another example is the red viscose that actually bleeds easily, mostly because the viscose is not able to actually create a very strong chemical bond with the red colors, so it actually bleeds. Or linen of bright colors actually fades unevenly. We already discussed what's the problem with the bright colors. And if we want silk with very intense colors, actually it can cause the creation of watermarks on the fabric and also the tone shifts, also because of the less strong chemical bond between the silk and the colors. So when a piece disappoints you, it's really bad quality alone. It's rarely just the fabric, it's rarely just the dye, it's rarely just the process. It can also be the washing, the care method, the exposure to sun. There are a lot of stuff, so it's not just one solution to all the problems. But what is important to remember is that nothing was created to be forever. We are not talking about diamonds and marketing campaigns. Colorful clothes are not going to be forever. I'm so sorry for breaking your heart like this, but this is not going to happen regardless of the color, fabric, and it's just not possible, I'm afraid. And this is not possible because color fading is all about chemistry. So when you're shopping, don't look for perfect color. Look for forgiving color if you want a wardrobe that is going to be long lasting. So use this mental checklist when you go shopping next time. First of all, look for slightly muted shades instead of ultra saturated ones, because the more intense the color, the less easier it will actually leave the fabric. But more muted colors will fade more evenly and don't reveal small color loss as quickly as the very saturated hues. Another tip, if you like multicolored pieces, go for melange, heathered or washed finishes. They are actually already having this built-in variation that makes wear and fading less noticeable over time. But this is a matter of personal preference. For example, I don't like this type of combination, so I'm just realizing that not all colorful clothes I have are going to last. That's just it. Another shopping advice I would suggest is to actually go for textured fabrics. Twills, knits, crepes and brush surfaces visually hide friction and color wear, so it will make this process a little less noticeable. And also during shopping, look at the piece of clothing. Do you see that the color is being transferred also to the backside or not? If the wrong side of the fabric isn't of the same color as the above, we're not talking about denim here, but all the other very thin or medium weight fabrics, this means that the color is not actually very well impregnated, so it's going to last a little less. So look for the pieces that are either yarn dyed or garment dyed, because these will tend to age more gracefully because color variation is already part of a design, which in simple terms means go for pieces that are going to look of the same color on the wrong side and on the right side. And when it comes to various colors and hues and saturation, we have to remember that perfect color is fragile. Imperfect color is forgiving and it's not that noticeable when it goes away. And although because of the chemistry behind how the dyeing process happens and how the type of dyes exist, there are actually some methods that will make clothes last longer and actually preserve their color a little for a longer time. This isn't about being overprotective of your clothes and doing some extra measures. It's mostly about small repeatable habits that slowly down color damage. And this matters especially if you want a capsule wardrobe, you wear repeated outfits often, you have a busy lifestyle, or you are tired of clothes looking tired too fast. So what you could do? You could wash less and air more, because odor doesn't always mean dirt. Airing removes smell without stressing the dye. So less washing, better for the color. Another tip is to actually turn garments inside out when they are going to be washed, because this reduces friction, which we know is a factor that really impacts the long lasting of the color, and also protects the most visible surface and slows color loss. And one of the enemies of color is the heat. So this is why use cold water, which is actually one of the simplest way to strong a little the dye fiber bonds. And also you could use gentle detergent or less of it, because strong surfactants strip color faster, especially from darks and brights hues. Another thing to do is to actually separate the clothes by color depth and hue, not just by light and dark colors. Because darks, brights and neutrals age differently, and so do blues, reds and greens. They can also color bleed into each other. Washing similar hues together reduces color transfer, dulling and uneven fading. And also, of course, use color catchers when washing and skip the dryers when you can, because a combination of heat and tumbling accelerates fading and fiber stress. And since we talked that the UV light actually is also a damaging factor for the clothes, dry away from direct sun, because the UV breaks down color even when fabrics look just drying, but the sun is still doing its thing. This is why the sun has bleaching properties. And also, when it comes to light, store away from constant light, because long-term exposure matters just as much as washing. And most importantly, accept that colors are fading. The goal isn't about freezing colors in time. It's letting it fade evenly, slowly and beautifully, and accepting it. When you choose clothes with colors, knowing how colors change, how the fabric actually behaves and what to do in order to preserve the color of your clothes, this is actually a strong skill to have. So congrats for staying until the end and learning all about the dyes and colors and all the processes and everything behind the color on your clothes and all the chemical processes that happen. And if this video helped, please give it a like or even leave a comment so I could know about it, and subscribe for more clothing videos like this one. And also follow me on Instagram, where I share how I also make clothes and more clothing tips as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.